Hello and welcome to the Media7 summer editions at Artisan Winery in West Auckland. This show focuses on music and its place in the media landscape. Later on we'll hear about a new music prize with a legendary name on it and talk to Dave Dobbin about the magic what he do. But first, it was announced before Christmas with all the fanfare of a note slipped under the door, but the reacquisition of New Zealand's most famous independent music label, Flying Nun Records, is big cultural news. Here's a catch-up on the return of the little label that did.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It was the winter of '81, and while they were fighting in the streets, a tune rang out. It was the clarion call of a new record label, Flying Nun Records. Although Roger Shepherd, the manager of a little shop off Cathedral Square, founded his label to release bands in his native Christchurch, it quickly became a byword for the so-called Dunedin sound.
Commercially, it was hugely successful for us, which gave us the confidence to do other stuff.
Shepherd's friends Chris Knox and Doug Hood lugged the tape machine south to record the Chills, the Villains, Sneaky Feelings and the Stones. Those handmade records were hand-delivered until industry changes forced a distribution deal with WEA, now Warner Music, and a move to Auckland.
I mean, for me, having just hated working with WEA in the Toy Love years, to suddenly be working for WEA again was just like the biggest kick in the balls I could imagine, really.
By the end of the 80s, the bigger Nun bands needed bigger budgets, and Shepherd took investment from Australia's Mushroom Records, which eventually became Flying Nun's owner. Along the way, Flying Nun had its only #1 hit, the Headless Chicken's George. The music industry's accelerating consolidation saw Mushroom merge with Festival Records, which in 2005 was sold by Rupert Murdoch to Warner Music. It was a long way from the DIY heritage.
I think what Flying Nun was not a sound, but a philosophy behind it, which is do it yourself, something that nobody else was doing in the world, and thinking, Christ, this is great.
And after a 25th anniversary box set, the catalogue went dark with Warner's. A body of music that continues to inspire indie bands around the world virtually disappeared from the shops.
This is the only way for me.
Enter Roger Shepherd, who, after 2 years of negotiations, bought back his own label just before Christmas. So, how much has changed, and what happens next? Roger Shepherd is with me now. Welcome, Roger.
Hi.
Let's start with how and why the reacquisition of Flying Nun Records happened.
Well, I guess I moved back from London back to New Zealand 4 years ago, and I think Warner's got me in to put together the box set that they did for the 25th anniversary.
Which was shortly after they had acquired the label.
Yes.
By acquiring Festival Mushroom.
Yep. So I put together the 80-odd tracks on that, and I guess part of the thing was coming back to live in New Zealand. Putting that box set together kind of reacquainted me with the label, the music that that I was quite involved with all through the 80s and 90s. And I just sort of, I guess, became reacquainted with it, got interested in it again, and just felt that perhaps it was going to sort of languish and perhaps disappear unless I made an effort to try and buy it back.
Can you give us any idea of what the catalogue was worth? Because it was always one of my if I won lotto dreams, so I'd kind of like to know.
Well, it could be a negative amount of money or it could be a positive amount of money. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say the value of it is what some fool would be willing to pay for it.
Now, let's be very clear about what the deal actually is, because I think there's still some confusion out there as a result of Warner's rather vague press release. You are the sole owner of the label and the name again now.
Yeah, I bought the label, I bought the name, back catalogue. Warner's remain our distributor in New Zealand.
In New Zealand only. So you've got all the acts that have been on Flying Nun?
Not all. There's some later ones that aren't included in the deal.
That would be like the Mint Chicks, who are part of the Warner's era.
Essentially bands that were signed to FMR This gets confusing. FMR, before it was acquired by Warner's. And,
so why didn't it work with Warner's? Why did all those records go to print? And what can you do different that they couldn't do?
Well, I guess it's, a major record companies, their function is to, or the way the business is going, is I guess their concern is increasingly to mass market hits, major releases. The label, is quite extensive. I think it's just a matter of it needs some care and attention that you can't get from a major record company. So Flying Nun was just a small part of their overall catalogue, which is, enormous.
And that was the problem, it was a little part of the empire, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at, say, Warner's in New Zealand, which is, I guess at the end of a chain of command all the way from New York or whatever, or LA, then obviously Flying Nun is not going to be a priority for them.
Well, was there a desire on your part to get it right this time? What did you learn first time around that you want to apply now?
Well, I learned everything the first time around by making all the mistakes, I guess. For me, it's very much about doing the right thing by the music and the artists that made it. And I really didn't want to see that music just disappear. So that was part of the motivation, and also I think there's business to be done. So again, I'm in a position where I've still retained contacts around the world. I still think it's possible to reactivate the catalogue and to make it work, generate some income for the people that made the music.
Now, for the greater part of the time when it was being negotiated, right up to near the end, the proposal was for Ben Howe of Arch Hill Records, who've released some of the post-Flying Nun artists, to be a partner in the deal. What happened there? Why didn't they?
Well, I guess lots of people were kind of keen to be involved, and Ben was one of them. And I just basically, I guess I made a business decision that he wasn't going to be involved. I mean, Ben's a fantastic person. The label's great, and he does lots of other things. He's got a touring company and now a publishing company. So I guess it was just one of those hard decisions that I felt I had to make.
And it was your personal decision. Mm. It's common knowledge in the industry that Ben's not that happy about the way it went, which isn't an ideal situation. Do you think that this can be resolved? And would you like to work with him?
Yeah, I know exactly. I mean, I think what he does in the business here is, he's a vital clog in what happens, and I think it's inevitable that we will work together.
Have you spoken to him since it was announced?
Not recently.
Right. Do you hope to?
I hope to.
Because I have to say personally, I think that's important. I'm assuming that you could, if you chose, simply re-release the catalogue of the artists who actually had a Flying Nun contract without further notice, but that's not what you plan, is it?
I think it's important that we I think basically everyone needs sort of up-to-date modern contracts, that recognise the fact that music is now, sold digitally, that are more equitable than the way contracts were written 20 years ago.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? The nature of recording contracts has changed, and for all that we bemoan the fate of the artist, they tend to be fairer contracts now, don't they?
They're fairer contracts, but I think a key development is the fact that huge studio bills are no longer a factor. Once you needed a record company to finance, to make an album, because the amount of money that you'd spend to make a record in a studio was so astronomical.
Because it's probably the case that most of the artists who are contracted still, in theory, owe Flying Nun money, don't they?
Probably, yeah.
Which was the nature of the industry back then, was that there would be these huge advances that artists gradually recouped out of royalties, and most didn't.
Well, yes, inevitably there'd only ever be a few that would recoup, and there would be the ones that went on to have sort of substantial success. So I guess the way the business used to work was that a record company would punt on an act having a mainstream success.
Yeah, it was a hit business, wasn't it? It was a speculative business.
I mean, Flying Nun was different to that in that we weren't spending, massive amounts of money and re-recording things in, months in an expensive studio in London, etc. But there's still an element of that dynamic, I guess, used to work.
So what do recording contracts look like now?
I guess they're generally more equitable, unless you're a kind of a mainstream pop band. I think you're talking about sort of profit splits, basically, these days.
Have the sources of revenue changed?
Totally, yeah. It used to just be the physical, like in the 70s, I guess, like being a record company was almost like printing money. And of course, by the time I got involved, it was somewhat different. 81, so it wasn't like printing money. But it used to be just physical sales, and that was how you generated your income. And traditionally, record companies were the ones that financed people's careers. So that's changed to the point where now the physical sales have been in decline. The CD is, well, it's still the dominant format, still the dominant way that people buy music, but it's fast declining. The digital thing is, the digital downloads is kind of slowly but significantly increasing.
And there's also publishing income, which seems to be the one that keeps growing year
Well, there's
after
always been publishing income, but now people kind of know what it is, and it's obviously more important than ever. You know, basically the business is the way you earn money in the business is it's not just one or two sources; it's a whole lot of different ways. So, whereas perhaps in the early '80s a band would balk at the idea of having a song used in an ad. Now there doesn't seem to be any discussion about yes or no. It's just let's do it.
Because the reality is that is how you get through. And Chris Knox is doing it, so it must be all right.
Well, he's been doing it for years.
Yes. Now, another element of the current environment is that people can download things without paying for them. You were quoted as saying that the controversial Section 92A of the Copyright Act was necessary to keep everyone in business. It was controversial when you said it. Do you want to revisit that?
Yeah, well, I just think it was quite good that I just felt I had to stand. I was amazed that no one was really, it seemed the whole discussion seemed very one-sided, and it seemed to be about people's right to people's right to be able to download music for nothing if they wanted to. And for me, that ultimately impacts on an artist's ability to earn money from the music they make. So, I just thought it was good for the sake of argument, really.
Right. Where do we go from here? Well, when can we start seeing archive releases and B, new acts? Because new acts are a part of it.
Yeah, it can't just be a reissue label. There's nothing duller than a reissue label. And there'd be nothing duller than working in a reissue label. So, yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of work to be done, I guess, housekeeping to kind of sort out the catalogue and, talk to all the artists, sort out what music's involved, and repackage and re-release. And we've got to find. I mean, a very very important part of the whole thing is to take it forward, to keep it fresh, to make it interesting, sign some new acts.
So, from the archives, which are the records that you're particularly personally excited about making available again? Because so much of it's not available.
Yeah, well, I don't really have favourites. That's one thing I've learned. Don't have favourites, but yeah, I mean, there's just the Chris Knox, the Tall Dwarfs catalogue. I mean, that's it's probably I think someone said it's 460 odd songs, so it's more than the Beatles ever released, which Chris would probably enjoy.
I'm sure Chris would
like.
enjoy that comparison. Yeah.
So I mean, just that job alone is enormous. The 3Ds obviously are playing over the next month. You can't buy anything of theirs physically at the moment. So yeah, there's plenty to do.
Right. Oh, best of luck with it, Roger.
Well, thank you.
And I hope it goes well. It's
yeah.
It's good news. After the break, Dylan Tate's name lives on in a new music prize.